Ma'am, I don't care who you are. That's what Officer Wilson said to Sarah Douglas at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning inside First National Bank. He was looking at a woman in a professional blazer trying to deposit a $15,000 charity check, money for domestic violence victims. The teller, Jessica, had called for backup over a suspicious transaction. Wilson strutted across the marble lobby like he owned the place. 30 years on the force, never been challenged by anyone. "Step away from the counter," he commanded. Sarah turned, confused. "Is there a problem, officer?" "You're under arrest for attempting to pass fraudulent checks." "I'm sorry, what?" Wilson didn't wait for an explanation. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the bank lobby. 200 customers stood frozen, watching a black woman get arrested for charity work. "Ma'am, I don't care who you are," Wilson repeated when Sarah tried to protest. He had no idea he'd just made the biggest mistake in Chicago's history, and that was before she became his worst nightmare. Sarah slid the check across the marble counter to the teller, a young woman named Jessica who'd processed her transactions before. "Good morning, Jessica. Depositing this into the shelter fund account, please." Jessica glanced at the check, then at Sarah, then back at the check. Her expression shifted, uncertain, almost fearful. "Ma'am, I need to get my supervisor. Is there a problem?" "Just standard procedure for large amounts." But Sarah noticed Jessica's hands trembling as she picked up the phone, noticed her speaking in whispers, noticed the way she kept glancing toward the security desk. 2 minutes later, the bank's glass doors burst open. Officer David Wilson strode across the lobby like he owned it. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of swagger that came from 30 years of never being questioned. His partner, Officer Davis, flanked him. Sarah didn't look up immediately. She was reviewing the deposit slip, making sure the routing numbers were correct. Professional habits. "Ma'am," Wilson's voice cut through the quiet banking atmosphere. "Step away from the counter." Sarah turned, confused. "Excuse me." "Step away from the counter, now." The lobby fell silent. 200 customers and employees suddenly focused on one spot, on one woman in a navy blazer who had no idea her world was about to flip upside down. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm simply making a deposit." "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempting to pass fraudulent checks." The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah felt her breath catch, her professional composure cracking. "I beg your pardon?" Wilson's hand moved to his handcuffs. The metal caught the fluorescent lights. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "Officer, this is clearly a mistake." "I can show you identification." "Ma'am, I don't care who you think you are. That check looks fake, and we've had reports of check fraud in this area." Sarah's mind raced. Reports from whom? The check was legitimate, certified, from her own bank. "Officer Wilson," she said, reading his name tag, keeping her voice level despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "I need to call my—" "You'll call someone from the station. Turn around." The handcuffs clicked, cold steel against warm skin. The sound echoed off marble walls, off silent faces, off the suddenly shattered assumption that justice was blind, but not colorblind. Sarah Douglas had spent 15 years on the federal bench. She'd sentenced murderers and freed the innocent. She'd upheld the Constitution and defended the rule of law. She'd never been on this side of the handcuffs, and she was about to learn just how dark this side could be. The walk from the teller window to the police car felt like a mile. Every eye in the bank followed Sarah as Wilson marched her through the lobby, his grip firm on her elbow. "Officer, you're making a serious mistake," Sarah said quietly, trying to maintain what dignity she could. "I'm a federal judge. That check is legitimate." Wilson's laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Lady, you wouldn't believe how many people try that line. Last week, some guy claimed he was the mayor." "I can prove it. My identification is in my purse." "Your purse is evidence now." They pushed through the glass doors into the Chicago morning. Pedestrians stopped and stared. Phone cameras appeared. Sarah felt the burn of humiliation as Wilson guided her toward the squad car, his hand on her head as he pushed her into the back seat. The partition between front and back felt like prison bars. The doors had no handles on the inside. Sarah was trapped. "Officer Wilson, I'm requesting permission to make a phone call. You'll get your call at the station. This is a violation of my constitutional rights." Wilson turned in his seat, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Ma'am, right now your rights are whatever I say they are. The District 18 station smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unflattering light. Sarah had been in police stations before, but always as an authority figure. Always with respect, not today. "Empty your pockets," the desk sergeant commanded. "Jewelry off." Sarah complied, placing her watch, her wedding ring, her pearl earrings into a plastic tray. Each item felt like another piece of her dignity being stripped away. "Officer, I need to contact my chambers. I have a hearing at 2 o'clock. You're not going anywhere, honey." The female officer who processed Sarah was methodical, thorough, cold. She went through Sarah's purse, item by item, examining each piece of identification with theatrical skepticism. "Federal Judge Sarah Douglas," she read aloud, holding up the ID. "Fancy. Because it's real." "Uh-huh. We'll see about that." But Sarah noticed something. The officer had looked at the badge, had seen the federal seal, the official credentials, the photograph that clearly matched the woman standing before her, and she was choosing not to believe it. This wasn't incompetence. This was deliberate. "I want to speak to your supervisor," Sarah said firmly. "He's busy." "Then I want to speak to the watch commander, also busy." "Then I want to exercise my right to a phone call." The officer smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Phone's broken." They led Sarah to interview room 3. Gray walls, metal table, 2 chairs. A camera mounted in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. Sarah focused on that camera. Evidence. Proof of how she was being treated. Proof that would matter later. Wilson entered carrying a file folder, settling into the chair across from her with practiced ease. "So, Sarah. Can I call you Sarah?" "You can call me Judge Douglas." "Right. About this check situation." "There is no situation. The check is legitimate. I raised that money through a charity auction at the Palmer House. I have receipts. I have witness statements. I have—" "What you have," Wilson interrupted, "is a very sophisticated fake check that fooled a lot of people." Sarah felt her professional calm beginning to crack. "That is absolutely false." "Is it?" "Because we ran the account numbers. Very interesting what we found." "What did you find?" Wilson leaned back, enjoying himself. "Well, that's part of the investigation now, isn't it?" But Sarah caught something in his expression. A flicker of uncertainty. He was bluffing. "Officer Wilson, I want to call my chambers immediately. Like I said, phone's broken. Then I want to call my attorney. After we finish here. Then I want to call the FBI." Wilson's smile faltered for just a moment, just long enough for Sarah to notice. "Ma'am, you're not calling anyone until we sort this out." Sarah looked directly into the camera, red light still blinking, recording everything. She had no idea that in 12 hours that recording would bring down an entire corruption network. But for now, she was just a woman in handcuffs, wondering how the system she'd devoted her life to serving could fail her so completely. Sarah straightened in her chair, drawing on 15 years of courtroom authority. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of federal law. "Officer Wilson, I am formally identifying myself as the Honorable Sarah Douglas, United States District Judge for the Northern District of Illinois. I am currently assigned to the federal building at 219 South Dearborn Street, courtroom 2156. I was appointed to the bench by President Obama in 2009 and confirmed by the Senate with a vote of 87-11. Wilson's partner Davis had been silent until now. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Sarah and Wilson. "Chief," Davis said quietly, "maybe we should—" "Should what?" Wilson snapped. "Believe every story that walks through that door?" Sarah continued, her voice steady despite the handcuffs cutting into her wrists. "You can verify my identity by calling the federal courthouse. Ask for Judge Patricia Martinez. She sits 2 chambers down from mine. Ask for my law clerk, Benjamin Hayes. Ask for court security." "Ma'am," Wilson said, leaning forward, "do you know how many people have sat in that chair and claimed to be someone important? Last month, we had a woman swear she was Nancy Pelosi. Check my fingerprints. They're in the federal database. Fingerprint machines down for maintenance." Sarah felt the first crack in her composure. This wasn't procedure. This was deliberate obstruction. "Officer Wilson, I have a federal hearing scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon. United States versus Riverside Construction. A fraud case involving $8 million in government contracts. If I don't appear, the case could be dismissed and criminals will walk free." Davis spoke up again. Chief, if she really is, she's not. Wilson's voice was flat, final. You know what I think? I think this is an elaborate con. Professional-grade fake ID, detailed backstory, sophisticated knowledge of court procedures. We're dealing with a pro here. Sarah stared at him. The camera in the corner continued recording, red light blinking, evidence of this conversation that would matter later. You've looked at my identification, she said carefully. You've seen the federal credentials, the photograph, the official seals. What exactly would convince you that I'm telling the truth? Wilson shrugged. Nothing. Because people like you lie as easy as breathing. The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind with devastating clarity. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or police incompetence. This was targeted, deliberate. Someone wanted her away from that courthouse, away from that 2 o'clock hearing. Who called you? She asked quietly. What? Someone called you about me, about the check. Who was it? Wilson's expression didn't change, but Davis looked uncomfortable again. Ma'am, we respond to reports of suspicious activity all the time. What reports? From whom? I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing investigations. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. The Riverside construction case had tentacles everywhere. City contracts, political connections, millions in fraudulent billing. She'd spent months reviewing evidence, preparing for today's hearing. Today's hearing that someone desperately didn't want to happen. How long are you planning to hold me? She asked. Until we sort this out. And how long will that take? Wilson checked his watch with theatrical precision. Well, it's almost noon now. Could take all day, maybe longer. These investigations can be thorough. All day. Past 2 o'clock, past the hearing. Sarah looked directly at the camera again. For the record, I am being illegally detained to prevent me from presiding over a federal hearing at 2 p.m. today. This is not a mistake. This is a deliberate act to obstruct justice. Wilson stood up, gathering his files. Ma'am, you can say whatever you want to that camera, but right now you're in our custody, and you'll stay here until we're satisfied you're not running a con. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Sarah alone with the blinking red light and the growing certainty that she'd stumbled into something much bigger than check fraud. She just didn't know how big yet. 2 hours passed before the door opened again, but it wasn't Officer Wilson who entered. It was a man in a suit, taller, older, with graying hair and the kind of authoritative presence that came with rank. Judge Douglas, he said, settling into the chair across from her. I'm Police Chief David Wilson. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Wilson. Same last name as the officer who'd arrested her. Are you related to Officer Wilson? My nephew. Good kid. Follows orders. The casual admission hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't coincidence. This was family business. Chief Wilson, I demand to be released immediately. I've been illegally detained for over 3 hours. Wilson opened a file folder, spreading photographs across the metal table. Photos of Sarah leaving the courthouse, Sarah at charity events, Sarah entering the bank this morning. They'd been watching her. Judge Douglas, let me be very clear about something. We know exactly who you are. We know about your little hearing today. We know about the evidence you think you have. Sarah's blood ran cold. This is a conspiracy to obstruct federal justice. This is us having a conversation. I want a lawyer. I want to call the FBI. You want a lot of things. Wilson leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. But what you need to understand is that sometimes federal judges get sick. Sometimes they can't make it to court. Sometimes cases get postponed. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You're going to call in sick today. You're going to reschedule your hearing, and you're going to forget about whatever you think you discovered in those Riverside construction files. Sarah met his gaze directly. I will do no such thing. Wilson sighed like a parent dealing with a stubborn child. Judge, you seem like a smart woman. You've had a good career. Federal pension, security clearance, respect in the community. It would be a shame to see all that disappear over a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? Well, there's the matter of this fraudulent check, and we're hearing some concerning things about your finances. Gambling debts, maybe? Expensive lifestyle on a judge's salary? Sarah's voice was ice cold. My finances are completely legitimate and above board. Are they? Because we're planning to investigate very, very thoroughly. Bank records, credit cards, every transaction for the past 5 years. Amazing what you can find when you really look. The threat was clear. Manufactured evidence, character assassination, the kind of slow-motion destruction that could end a federal career even if the charges never stuck. And if I cooperate? If you cooperate, this whole thing was just a big misunderstanding. Mistaken identity. You get a formal apology, maybe even a commendation for your patience and understanding. Sarah looked at the photographs spread across the table. Weeks of surveillance, planning, coordination. Who's behind this? She asked. Wilson smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Judge, that's not really your concern anymore. Your concern is deciding how this ends for you. Sarah thought about the evidence in her chambers. Financial records proving Riverside Construction had stolen $8 million in federal funds. Phone records connecting city officials to the fraud. Bank documents that would send people to prison for decades. I won't reschedule the hearing. Wilson gathered up the photographs, sliding them back into the folder. Well then, Judge Douglas, I guess we'll have to investigate this check situation very thoroughly indeed. The way he said thoroughly made it sound like a death sentence. They moved Sarah to a holding cell an hour later. A concrete box with metal benches and the persistent smell of disinfectant mixed with despair. She wasn't alone. A black man in his 40s sat on the opposite bench, wearing a rumpled business suit and an expression of resigned frustration. He looked up when Sarah entered, taking in her professional attire and obvious distress. "First time?" he asked quietly. "I beg your pardon?" "In lockup. You have that 'this can't be happening to me' look." Sarah settled onto the bench, maintaining as much dignity as possible in handcuffs. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake." The man laughed, but without humor. "Sister, we're all here by mistake. I'm Marcus Johnson, by the way. And you are?" "Sarah Douglas?" Johnson's expression shifted slightly. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Sarah Douglas? As in Judge Sarah Douglas?" Sarah nodded carefully. In here, she didn't know who to trust. "What are you in for?" Johnson asked. "Check fraud, allegedly. You? Disorderly conduct. Apparently asking too many questions at a city council meeting is disturbing the peace." Something in his tone caught Sarah's attention. "What kind of questions?" Johnson glanced around the cell, then leaned closer. "The kind that makes certain people nervous. I'm a reporter, investigative journalism, been looking into some interesting connections between city contracts and campaign contributions." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What kind of connections?" "The kind that involve 8-figure construction deals and judges who ask inconvenient questions." Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them without words. Johnson stood up, walked to the cell door, then returned. His movement looked casual, but Sarah noticed him checking for surveillance, for listening devices. "You know," he said conversationally, "I was supposed to cover a hearing today. Federal case. Something about construction fraud. Real important case, from what I hear." 2 o'clock? Sarah asked quietly. "That's the one. Shame if something happened to delay it." Johnson sat back down, closer this time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been investigating this for months. City contracts, police protection, judges getting pressured. It's all connected." "Connected to what?" "Riverside Construction, but also North Shore Casino. Money laundering, probably. Big money." Sarah's mind raced. North Shore Casino wasn't part of her current case, but she remembered seeing the name in financial documents. Shell companies, complex transactions, the kind of paper trail that usually meant something illegal. "They're scared of Thursday," Johnson continued. "Thursday? Your hearing is Thursday, right? Not today, Thursday." Sarah shook her head. "Today. 2 o'clock today." Johnson's expression changed. "No, ma'am. Today is Tuesday. Your hearing is Thursday. The Riverside case." The pieces clicked. Someone had fed her false information, made her think the hearing was today, made her rush to deposit the charity check this morning instead of waiting, set her up to be arrested at exactly the right time. "They played me," she whispered. "They played both of us. But here's the thing. I've got insurance." Johnson glanced around again, then reached into his sock, pulling out a device no bigger than a matchbook. A recording device. "Been recording everything since they brought me in. Every conversation, every threat, every admission." Sarah stared at the device. Evidence. Real evidence. "There's something else," she said. "I have emergency judicial powers. Federal judges can convene emergency hearings, can't be prevented from performing constitutional duties. Even if they hold me here, I can still—" She stopped, looking around the cell. "If I can get word to the outside." Johnson smiled grimly. "That device isn't just a recorder. It's got cellular capability. Been transmitting everything to my editor at the Tribune. Real-time backup." Sarah felt the first spark of hope since this nightmare began. "Your editor knows what's happening?" "My editor, my source at the FBI, and my contact at Channel 7 News. As of 1 hour ago, this conversation is being heard by people who can do something about it." For the first time in hours, Sarah smiled. "Then let's give them something worth hearing." An hour later, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the holding cells. Sarah recognized Chief Wilson's voice before she saw him, talking on his phone as he passed by the cell. She pressed herself against the bars, straining to hear. Johnson moved to the opposite side, creating a listening post. "Told you, she's not going anywhere," Wilson was saying. "Judge Douglas is our guest until Friday at the earliest." A pause. Sarah could hear an agitated voice on the other end, though she couldn't make out words. "Anderson, relax. I've got this under control. She doesn't know anything about the casino connections, and she's not going to find out." Anderson. Prosecutor James Anderson. Sarah knew him. They'd worked together on several cases. A prosecutor who specialized in white-collar crime, known for his aggressive tactics and political ambitions. "Look," Wilson continued, "the hearing can't happen without a judge, right? And if Judge Douglas is unfortunately indisposed with a personal emergency—" Another pause. Wilson's voice got quieter, but Sarah caught enough. "The charity check was genius, by the way. How did you know she'd be at the bank this morning?" Johnson caught Sarah's eye, pointing to his recording device, getting every word. "What? Of course I looked at her ID. Federal judge, FBI clearance, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing. Nobody's going to believe she was arrested for being a federal judge. They're going to believe she was arrested for check fraud." Wilson was moving away now, his voice fading, but Sarah heard the crucial words. "Thursday at 2 o'clock. Make sure the case gets postponed until next month. By then, we'll have sorted out the evidence problems." Evidence problems. They were planning to destroy evidence. 20 minutes later, Wilson appeared at the cell door, looking satisfied with himself. "How are we doing in here? Comfortable?" "Chief Wilson," Sarah said, "this illegal detention is being recorded. Every word you say, every violation of my constitutional rights." Wilson laughed. "Recorded by whom? Your invisible friends." He pulled up a chair, settling in like he had all day, like a man who enjoyed having power over others. "You know what I love about this job? People think they're so smart, think they can outsmart the system, but the system is people like me. People like you. People who understand how things really work. See, you federal judges, you live in your ivory towers thinking justice is about laws and evidence and constitutional rights. But real justice is about relationships, connections, knowing the right people." Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her mind was cataloging every word. "Take your little hearing Thursday. Riverside Construction, right? $8 million in federal contracts. Very complicated case. Lots of shell companies, offshore accounts, hard to follow the money." Wilson was enjoying himself now, the way corrupt cops always did when they thought they held all the cards. "But here's what you don't know, Judge. Riverside Construction has a sister company. Guess what it's called?" Sarah waited. "North Shore Casino Services. And guess who provides security for North Shore Casino?" The picture became crystal clear. Police protection from money laundering, construction contracts funding casino operations, a closed loop of corruption that her hearing would expose. "So you see," Wilson continued, "this isn't just about $8 million in construction fraud. This is about a very profitable business arrangement that's been working just fine for everyone involved. Until now." Wilson's smile faded slightly. "Until now. But we're fixing that problem." The cell door opened with a clang that echoed off concrete walls. Sarah looked up to see a familiar face. Prosecutor James Anderson, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression of professional concern. "Judge Douglas," he said, his voice carrying just the right tone of outrage and sympathy. "I came as soon as I heard. This is absolutely unacceptable." Sarah felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone with authority who could end this nightmare. "James, thank God. These officers have been holding me illegally for over 4 hours. They're trying to prevent me from presiding over the Riverside construction hearing." Anderson turned to Chief Wilson with theatrical anger. "Chief, what the hell is going on here? This woman is a federal judge. This is a catastrophic mistake." Wilson played his part perfectly. "Prosecutor Anderson, we had reports of check fraud. The suspect presented questionable identification." "Questionable identification? This is Judge Sarah Douglas. I've worked with her for years." Anderson's voice carried the weight of legal authority. "Release her immediately." Sarah stood up, ready to walk out, ready to get to her courthouse, to her chambers, to the evidence that would bring down a corruption network. "However," Anderson continued, and something in his tone made Sarah pause, "we do need to discuss this situation." "Discuss what situation?" Anderson's expression shifted subtly. The concern was still there, but something else lurked underneath, something calculating. "Well, there's the matter of your schedule. Today's been traumatic. You should probably take some time to recover." Anderson gestured to Wilson, who stepped outside the cell but remained visible through the bars. Close enough to hear, far enough to maintain the pretense of privacy. "Sarah," Anderson said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, "let's talk realistically about your situation." "My situation is that I've been illegally detained and need to get to my courthouse." "Your situation is more complicated than that." Anderson opened his briefcase, pulling out a file folder. "See, while you've been here, some interesting information has come to light about your finances." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. "What are you talking about?" "Bank records showing some unusual transactions, large cash deposits, payments from consulting companies that seem to exist only on paper." "That's completely false." "Is it? Because I'm looking at documentation that suggests otherwise. Account numbers, dates, amounts, very detailed documentation." Anderson spread papers across the metal bench. Bank statements, transaction records, consulting agreements, all bearing Sarah's name and signature, all completely fabricated. "James, you know this is manufactured evidence." "Do I?" "Because these documents look very official to me, very convincing. The kind of evidence that could destroy a federal career even if criminal charges never stick." Sarah stared at the false documents. Months of work, professional-grade forgeries, character assassination planned with military precision. "What do you want?" "I want what's best for everyone involved. The Riverside construction hearing needs to be postponed, just temporarily. Give everyone time to review the evidence properly." "How long?" 6 weeks, maybe 8, just until we can sort through some procedural issues." Sarah's mind raced. 6 to 8 weeks would allow them to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, move money offshore. By the time the hearing reconvened, there would be nothing left to prosecute. "And if I refuse?" Anderson gestured to the fabricated documents. "Then I'm afraid we'll have to investigate these financial irregularities very thoroughly. Federal judges held to high standards, you understand. Ethics violations, tax evasion, accepting bribes from construction companies. None of that is true. Truth is what you can prove in court, Sarah, and these documents are very convincing." Sarah looked at Anderson, a man she'd worked with for years, respected, trusted. A man who was now systematically destroying her life to protect a criminal conspiracy. "You're one of them. I'm someone who understands how the world really works. The question is, are you smart enough to understand it too?" Anderson closed his briefcase with a soft click, the sound somehow more ominous than Wilson's shouting had been. "I'll give you an hour to think about it, Sarah, but remember, this offer expires today. Tomorrow, those financial documents get turned over to the FBI Financial Crimes Division." The cell door slammed shut behind him. Sarah sank onto the metal bench, the weight of betrayal crushing down on her shoulders. "You okay?" Johnson asked quietly. "No, I'm not okay. That man has been my colleague for 5 years. We've prosecuted criminals together. And now he's showing you what he really is." Sarah looked at the fabricated documents Anderson had left behind. Professional quality, complete with forged signatures and fake letterhead. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment operation. "How long have they been planning this?" "Months, probably. Maybe longer." Johnson picked up one of the false bank statements, examining it. This is expensive work, corporate-level forgery. Someone's invested serious money in taking you down. Sarah's phone buzzed. Wait, she didn't have her phone. The sound was coming from Johnson's hidden device. That's my editor, Johnson whispered. Text message through the cellular backup. He glanced at the tiny screen. Federal Judge Patricia Martinez has been trying to reach you. When you didn't show up for your afternoon meeting, she got worried, started making calls. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Patricia Martinez sat on the bench 2 chambers down from hers, a 20-year veteran with connections throughout the federal system. What did she find out? That you're not in any hospital, not at home, no family emergency on record. And when she called District 18 to ask if there had been any incidents involving federal personnel, Johnson paused, reading more of the message. They told her they'd never heard of Judge Sarah Douglas. Johnson continued reading from his device. But here's the good news. Judge Martinez didn't buy it. She called FBI agent Rebecca Taylor, no relation to my reporter contact, and filed an official missing person report for a federal judge. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. How long ago? 20 minutes. And Agent Taylor didn't waste time. She's already pulled your GPS data from your federal security clearance, knows you were last seen at First National Bank at 10:30 this morning. More text messages were coming through. Johnson's eyes widened as he read. Holy shit. Sorry, Your Honor, but this is getting interesting fast. What? My editor contacted Channel 7's Taylor Williams. That's my reporter contact. She's been investigating police corruption for months. When she heard about a federal judge being held illegally, she started making calls of her own. Johnson looked up from the device. Judge, did you know that under Section 1983 of the Federal Code, any federal judge can invoke emergency judicial powers if their ability to perform constitutional duties is being illegally obstructed? Sarah's mind raced through legal precedents. Emergency powers, constitutional duties, federal jurisdiction over state and local interference. I can convene an emergency hearing, she said slowly. Even from here, even in custody. If I can establish that my detention is illegal and is preventing me from performing federal judicial duties, your friend Judge Martinez apparently knows that too, because she's already filed emergency motions on your behalf. Johnson's device buzzed again. More messages. His expression grew more serious as he read. Judge, we need to talk fast. Things are accelerating outside these walls. What do you mean? Agent Taylor contacted the Federal Marshal Service. When federal judges go missing, they don't mess around. U.S. Marshals are en route to this building right now. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Federal marshals had authority over local police. They could override Chief Wilson's detention order. How long? 30 minutes, maybe less. But here's the thing. Wilson and Anderson don't know that yet, which means they're about to make some very stupid decisions. Johnson held up his recording device. And I'm going to capture every word. There's something else, Sarah said. Judge Martinez mentioned emergency judicial powers. I can convene a hearing remotely, video conference, telephone, even from a jail cell if necessary. What would that accomplish? Public record, official federal proceedings. If I can get this on the record, everything that's happened here becomes evidence in a federal case. Johnson's device buzzed one more time. He read the message, then looked at Sarah with something approaching awe. Judge, your colleague Patricia Martinez just scheduled an emergency federal hearing for 4 p.m. today. Video conference. The matter is unlawful detention of federal judicial personnel, and she's requesting that you appear remotely as both complainant and presiding authority. Sarah smiled for the first time in hours. Then I guess I have a hearing to attend. From a jail cell? From wherever I am. The Constitution doesn't stop working just because corrupt cops put me in handcuffs. Outside in the hallway, they could hear Anderson's voice, agitated, making urgent phone calls. He was about to learn that federal judges don't disappear quietly. Anderson's voice carried down the hallway, sharp with panic. Sarah and Johnson pressed themselves against the cell bars, straining to hear every word. What do you mean, federal marshals? When? A pause. Shit. How long do we have? Another voice, Chief Wilson, responded. 20 minutes, maybe less. Someone filed a missing person report. Who? Judge Martinez. Apparently when Douglas didn't show up for some meeting, she started asking questions. Sarah heard the slam of a door, then footsteps pacing rapidly. Anderson was losing his composure. This changes everything, Anderson said. We can't just hold her until Thursday anymore. So what do you want to do? I want this problem to go away permanently. The words hit Sarah like ice water. Johnson's hand moved to his recording device, making sure it was capturing everything. James, Wilson's voice carried a note of caution, we're already in deep. If something happens to a federal judge, if something happens to her, it's a tragedy. Car accident, maybe. Happens all the time. Judge tries to flee custody, crashes on Lakeshore Drive. Very sad. Sarah felt her hands trembling. They were talking about murder. The casino people aren't going to like this, Wilson said. The casino people are going to love this. No judge, no hearing, no prosecution. $8 million in construction fraud disappears forever, and the money laundering operation stays protected. More footsteps in this hallway. Multiple voices now. Sarah counted at least 4 different people. Rodriguez, I want every file related to Riverside construction removed from the evidence room, Anderson commanded. Tonight. Everything burns. What about the digital records? Already taken care of. Our contact at the courthouse says Douglas's computer had a catastrophic hard drive failure this afternoon. Very unfortunate timing. Sarah's blood ran cold. Years of work, hundreds of financial documents, witness statements, phone records, all being systematically destroyed. What about the witnesses? A new voice asked. What about them? Some of them have already given testimony. Construction workers, bookkeepers, that accountant from Riverside. Anderson was quiet for a moment. The accountant had a family emergency, moved to Florida. The construction workers got better jobs in Texas. The bookkeepers, well, sometimes people decide not to cooperate with federal investigations. You're talking about intimidating federal witnesses. I'm talking about people making smart decisions about their futures. Johnson's device was getting it all. Every admission, every crime being planned, every witness being threatened. Wilson's voice again. So what's the plan for the judge? We can't keep her here much longer. Marshals will tear this place apart. We need to move her. Move her where? Officially? Transport to county facility for processing. Unofficially? She never makes it there. Sarah heard papers rustling like someone examining a map. Lakeshore Drive has construction zones. Poor visibility. If a transport vehicle took the wrong exit, hit a concrete barrier at 60 miles per hour. Anderson's voice trailed off meaningfully. That's a federal judge, James. FBI will investigate. FBI will find evidence of depression, work stress, maybe some financial problems that suggest she was planning to flee the country. People do desperate things when they're cornered. Wilson sounded skeptical. The financial evidence you showed her, that's not going to hold up under real scrutiny. It doesn't have to. Just has to muddy the waters long enough for us to clean house. By the time anyone figures out the documents were fabricated, all the witnesses will be gone and all the evidence will be destroyed. Sarah felt sick. They'd planned her character assassination as carefully as they'd planned her murder. Johnson's device buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen, then at Sarah. Federal marshals are 5 minutes out, he whispered. Thank God! No, that's not good news. Listen. Anderson's voice was getting closer to their cell. We move her now. Wilson, get the transport van. Tell everyone she's being transferred to county lockup. What about the reporter? What reporter? The guy in the cell with her, Marcus Johnson. He's been asking questions about our operations. 2 accidents in 1 day might raise questions, but if Mr. Johnson was resisting arrest during the transport... Sarah grabbed Johnson's arm. They're going to kill both of us. Johnson held up his device. Not if this gets out first. He pressed a button. The small screen lit up with the words, streaming live. What does that mean? It means everything they just said is being broadcast live to Channel 7 News, the Chicago Tribune, and FBI headquarters. Anderson's voice cut through their whispered conversation. Get them both, now! We've got maybe 10 minutes before this place is crawling with federal agents. Keys jingled in the lock. Sarah looked at Johnson. Is there enough evidence? Murder conspiracy, witness intimidation, evidence destruction, bribery of federal officials? Yeah, I'd say there's enough. The cell door swung open. Chief Wilson stood there with handcuffs and a look that said he'd already decided they weren't going to survive the next hour. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, time to go. Wilson's grip on Sarah's arm was unnecessarily tight as he marched her and Johnson through the station's back exit. The transport van idled in the alley, its engine rumbling like a predator. "Where exactly are you taking us?" Sarah asked. "County lockup," Wilson replied, but his eyes avoided hers. The van was unmarked, no official plates, no police markings. Sarah had been transported between facilities before. This wasn't standard procedure. "This isn't a police transport vehicle," she said. "Budget cuts. We use what we can get." They loaded Sarah and Johnson into the back of the van. No partition between front and back, no safety equipment, no cameras. Just two metal benches and small windows tinted so dark you couldn't see out. Wilson climbed into the driver's seat. Anderson took the passenger seat, turning to face them. "Judge Douglas, I want you to know this isn't personal. You seem like a decent person, but you picked the wrong case to be thorough with." The van pulled out of the alley, heading north instead of west toward the county facility. Sarah knew Chicago's geography. They were heading toward the industrial district, toward the lake, toward places where people disappeared. 20 minutes later, the van stopped. Through the tinted windows, Sarah could see concrete walls, rusted metal, the kind of abandoned building that dotted Chicago's industrial lakefront. Wilson opened the van doors. End of the line. The warehouse smelled like motor oil and decay. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on concrete walls. This wasn't a place for processing prisoners. This was a place for making problems disappear. "Gentlemen," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "You're about to commit the murder of a federal judge. Do you understand the consequences?" Anderson checked his watch. "Judge, by the time anyone finds this place, we'll have established that you and Mr. Johnson died in a tragic transport accident. Very sad, very unfortunate." Johnson spoke up. "You know federal marshals are already at the station, right? They're going to notice we're gone. They're going to be told you were transferred to county lockup. By the time they figure out that was a lie, you'll have been reported as escape attempts who died in a crash." Wilson pulled out his service weapon, checking the magazine. "Nothing personal, folks. Just business." Sarah felt desperation clawing at her throat. Think. Use your legal training. There had to be something. "I want to write a letter," she said. "A what?" "A final letter to my family. It's a constitutional right. Last words." Anderson and Wilson exchanged glances. "You've got 5 minutes." Wilson tossed her a pen and a piece of paper torn from a notepad. Sarah wrote quickly, her handwriting shaky but legible. "If you are reading this, I am likely dead. I am Federal Judge Sarah Douglas. I have been murdered by Police Chief David Wilson and Prosecutor James Anderson to prevent my presiding over United States v. Riverside Construction. The case involves $8 million in fraud connected to North Shore Casino money laundering. Wilson and Anderson are part of a corruption network that includes... Asterisk. She folded the paper, slipping it into the inner pocket of her blazer. 5 minutes, she said quietly to Johnson. For what? For federal marshals to figure out we're not at county lockup. Through the warehouse windows, Sarah could hear the sound of machinery, a mechanical digging sound, rhythmic and ominous. "What is that?" Johnson asked. Wilson smiled. "Site preparation. This warehouse sits on the old dump grounds. Lots of soft soil, easy digging." The implication hit Sarah like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to kill them, they were planning to bury them where they'd never be found. Anderson's phone buzzed. He answered it, speaking in low tones. "Yeah, they're asking questions at the station. No, Wilson handled it. County lockup, that's what we told them. How long until they check? Couple hours, maybe." He hung up, looking satisfied. "Federal marshals bought the transfer story. We've got time." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to control her breathing, trying to think like a judge instead of a victim. "You know," she said quietly, "when federal judges disappear, it doesn't just trigger local investigation. It triggers congressional oversight, Justice Department review, FBI task forces, not if they think you fled the country with stolen money. Is that your plan? Frame me as a corrupt judge who took bribes and ran?" Anderson shrugged. "The evidence is already planted. Offshore accounts in your name, payments from shell companies, communications with criminal organizations. Very thorough documentation." The mechanical digging sound stopped. Wilson's radio crackled. "Site's ready, Chief." Sarah felt her composure finally crack. This was real. They were really going to kill her and bury her in an unmarked grave. Her family would think she was a criminal who'd fled the country. The corruption would continue. Justice would never come. She thought about the evidence in her chambers, the witnesses who'd trusted her, the victims who deserved justice, all lost because she'd tried to do her job. Wilson and Anderson moved to the far side of the warehouse, their voices echoing off concrete walls. "How long until the site's finished?" Anderson asked. "Another hour. Deep enough that they'll never be found." "And the alibis?" "I was home all evening. You were working late at the office. Security cameras will back that up." Sarah strained to hear more. 1 hour. They had 1 hour before. "What about the reporter's equipment?" Wilson asked. "He had some kind of recording device." Johnson tensed beside her. "Already taken care of. Smashed it in the van. Even if he was transmitting, the signal's dead now." But Sarah remembered Johnson's confidence about the live streaming. Had he been bluffing? Or was evidence of their conspiracy already in the hands of people who could act on it? Anderson's phone rang again. This time, his expression changed as he answered. "What do you mean they're not at county? When did they check?" "Shit." Wilson looked up sharply. "Problem?" "Federal marshals went to county lockup. We're not there. They're asking questions." "How long before they trace the van?" "I don't know. Maybe—" Anderson's phone rang again. Different ringtone. Emergency alert. "Channel 7 News is reporting a breaking story about corruption in the Chicago Police Department," he said, his face pale. "They're claiming to have audio recordings of police officials planning to murder a federal judge." Sarah felt hope flare in her chest. Johnson smiled grimly. "Guess my equipment wasn't as broken as you thought." The warehouse doors exploded inward with a crash that echoed off concrete walls. Federal marshals poured through the opening, weapons drawn, voices commanding immediate surrender. "U.S. Marshals, everyone on the ground, now!" Wilson reached for his weapon, but 3 red laser dots appeared on his chest. Anderson raised his hands slowly, his face ashen. "Chief Wilson, Prosecutor Anderson," the lead marshal called out. "You're under arrest for kidnapping federal personnel." Sarah felt relief flood through her system, but her judicial training kicked in immediately. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. "Marshal," she called out, "I'm Judge Sarah Douglas. I need to establish federal jurisdiction over this scene immediately." The lead marshal, a woman in her 40s with silver hair and the bearing of a veteran, approached carefully. "Your Honor, I'm Deputy Marshal Rebecca Thompson. Are you injured?" "I'm fine, but this warehouse is now a federal crime scene. I need communications capability immediately. Emergency federal hearing must be convened." Marshal Thompson looked confused. "Ma'am, shouldn't we get you medical attention first?" "Marshal, I'm invoking my constitutional authority as a federal judge. This crime scene contains evidence of a conspiracy to obstruct federal justice. I need to preserve that evidence and get testimony on the record before anyone can destroy it." Sarah's voice carried absolute authority. This was her domain now. Federal law, constitutional procedure, the machinery of justice. "Johnson," she called to her cellmate, "is your recording device still transmitting?" "Yes, Your Honor. Channel 7, FBI, and Tribune are all getting live feed." Marshal Thompson provided Sarah with a secure satellite phone. Within 10 minutes, Sarah had contacted federal judge Patricia Martinez and established an emergency video conference. "Patricia, I'm invoking emergency judicial powers under Article 3, Section 1. I need an immediate public hearing on corruption and conspiracy to obstruct federal justice." "Sarah, are you safe?" "I'm safe, but the evidence needs to be preserved and the testimony needs to be on record before this conspiracy can cover its tracks any further." Judge Martinez's face appeared on the phone's screen, her courtroom visible behind her. "I've already prepared emergency motions. We can stream this hearing live on federal court channels." "Make it public," Sarah said firmly. "Full transparency. The people of Chicago need to see what their tax dollars have been paying for." Wilson and Anderson, now in handcuffs, watched in horrified fascination as Sarah transformed from victim to the most powerful person in the room. "Your Honor," Anderson called out desperately, "I invoke my right to counsel." "Mr. Anderson," Sarah replied coldly, "you'll have plenty of time to discuss counsel. Right now, you're going to listen while I place your crimes on the federal record." The live stream went active at 6:47 p.m. Within minutes, thousands of viewers were watching as Judge Sarah Douglas, still in her wrinkled blazer from 12 hours of illegal detention, presided over an emergency federal hearing from a warehouse crime scene. "This is an emergency hearing under federal jurisdiction," Sarah began, looking directly into the camera. "I am Judge Sarah Douglas, and I'm about to present evidence of a conspiracy involving local police, prosecutors, and criminal organizations to obstruct federal justice." She turned to Wilson. "Chief Wilson, you are under oath. Do you understand that perjury in a federal proceeding carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison?" Wilson's lawyer, who had arrived minutes earlier, whispered urgently in his ear. "I understand," Wilson said reluctantly. "Did you knowingly and willfully detain me today to prevent me from presiding over a federal hearing?" Wilson looked at Anderson, then at the cameras. The weight of federal law pressed down on him. I was following orders." "Whose orders?" "Prosecutor Anderson coordinated with certain interested parties." "What interested parties?" Wilson's resolve cracked. "North Shore Casino, Robert Miller specifically. They were paying us to protect their money laundering operation." The live stream chat exploded with activity. Local news stations were picking up the feed. This was going out live to hundreds of thousands of viewers. Anderson leaped to his feet. "Your Honor, Chief Wilson is clearly coerced." "Mr. Anderson," Sarah's voice cut like a blade, "you will remain silent or be held in contempt of this federal proceeding." Sarah continued methodically, using 15 years of judicial experience to extract the truth. "Chief Wilson, how much money did North Shore Casino pay your department?" $50,000 a month, sometimes more for special services." "What special services?" "Protection from investigations, early warning about federal interest, sometimes witness intimidation." The camera captured every word. This wasn't just testimony, this was a public destruction of a criminal network. "Mr. Johnson," Sarah addressed her former cellmate, "please play the recordings you captured today." Johnson connected his device to the federal communication system. Anderson's voice filled the warehouse, crystal clear. "Judge tries to flee custody, crashes on Lakeshore Drive. Very sad. The casino people are going to love this. No judge, no hearing, no prosecution. Asterisk." The live stream viewers were hearing a prosecutor plan the murder of a federal judge in his own words. "Your Honor," Anderson's lawyer interrupted, "my client was clearly speaking hypothetically." "Counselor," Sarah replied, "your client was speaking to police officers about murdering me. There's nothing hypothetical about conspiracy to commit murder." Sarah looked directly into the camera, addressing not just the live stream viewers but the entire nation. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is both the failure and the triumph of our justice system. The failure occurred when corrupt officials believed they could place themselves above the law. The triumph is occurring right now as that same law holds them accountable." She turned to Marshal Thompson. "I'm issuing federal arrest warrants for all co-conspirators in this matter. Robert Miller, owner of North Shore Casino, any police officers who accepted bribes, any city officials who facilitated this conspiracy." Marshal Thompson nodded. "Warrants will be executed immediately, Your Honor. Furthermore, I'm ordering a federal investigation into all cases handled by Prosecutor Anderson for the past 5 years. Any convictions obtained through corruption will be reviewed." Anderson slumped in his chair, realizing the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about one case anymore. This was about his entire career. "Chief Wilson," Sarah continued, "your department will be placed under federal oversight pending a complete investigation of corruption." Sarah faced the camera one final time. "The Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person, no matter how powerful, no matter what office they hold, is above the law. Today, that guarantee was tested. Today, it held firm." The live stream had reached over 1 million viewers. News networks were picking up the feed. Social media was exploding with #Justice for Judge Douglas. "This emergency hearing is concluded. Federal marshals will take custody of all defendants. Justice will be served." The warehouse had transformed into a federal command center. Marshal Thompson coordinated with FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and field teams across Chicago. The emergency hearing's live stream had ended, but the arrests were just beginning. "Chief Wilson," Sarah said, still presiding with federal authority, "you have an opportunity to cooperate fully. Where can we find Robert Miller?" Wilson, His career and freedom evaporating by the minute made the calculation that experienced criminals always make: self-preservation. North Shore Casino. He's got an office on the top floor, but he also has a yacht docked at Belmont Harbor. If he's running, that's where he'll go. Marshal Thompson spoke into her radio. All units, be advised. Suspect Robert Miller, multiple locations, North Shore Casino and Belmont Harbor. Consider armed and dangerous. Agent Taylor, who had arrived during the hearing, approached Sarah. Your Honor, we've been tracking financial transactions between North Shore Casino and various city accounts. Wire transfers, cash payments, shell company transactions. We can trace the corruption back 3 years. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate? 12 million in bribes, kickbacks, and laundered funds. Sarah felt satisfaction settle in her chest. Not just justice for herself, but justice for every case that had been corrupted, every witness who had been intimidated, every victim who had been denied their day in court. Marshal Thompson's radio crackled with updates. Team 1 at North Shore Casino. Suspect Miller not in office. Security says he left 20 minutes ago with multiple suitcases. Team 2, status on Belmont Harbor. In position, visual on suspect's yacht, engines running, preparing to depart. Sarah listened to the coordination with professional satisfaction. This was federal law enforcement operating at peak efficiency, the system working exactly as designed. Team 2, you are authorized to intercept. Do not allow departure. Through the radio, they heard the arrest unfold in real time. Federal agents, Robert Miller, you're under arrest. Step away from the boat. Sir, put your hands where we can see them. You're surrounded. A pause, then. Suspect in custody. Multiple suitcases containing cash and documents. Estimate $2 million in cash. Wilson shook his head in defeat. He kept records of everything. Every payment, every favor, every crime we covered up. Miller was paranoid about people betraying him, so he documented everything. Where are those records? Sarah asked. Safe deposit boxes, probably. Maybe his home office. He's got backup files everywhere. Sarah turned to Agent Taylor. I want those files secured immediately. Every document, every record, every piece of evidence. Over the next hour, Sarah watched the corruption network collapse like a house of cards. Her federal authority had triggered a coordinated law enforcement response that reached into every corner of the conspiracy. Judge Douglas, Agent Taylor reported, we've arrested 6 police officers who were on North Shore Casino's payroll, 3 city council members who approved fraudulent construction contracts, 2 bank officials who facilitated money laundering. What about the evidence destruction we heard about? We got to the courthouse just in time. They'd started shredding files, but we recovered most of the documents. The digital records they claimed were destroyed. IT department had automatic backups that the conspirators didn't know about. Sarah felt a grim smile cross her face. Criminals always underestimated the complexity of the systems they tried to corrupt. Your Honor, Marshal Thompson approached. We have Patricia Williams, the court clerk who was manipulating hearing schedules, in custody. She's cooperating fully. What is she telling you? That this conspiracy goes back over 2 years. Dozens of cases were compromised. Witness intimidation, evidence tampering, bribed officials. She kept detailed records of which cases were influenced and which were legitimate. Sarah's phone buzzed with calls from news networks. CNN, NBC, Fox News, BBC. The story had gone international. Federal judge kidnapped and nearly murdered by corrupt police and prosecutors, then presiding over her own emergency hearing to bring down the entire network. Judge Douglas, a reporter called out as news crews arrived at the warehouse. How does it feel to have survived an assassination attempt and then immediately prosecute your own attackers? Sarah faced the cameras with the same dignity she'd carried throughout the ordeal. It feels like the Constitution working exactly as the founders intended. No person, regardless of their office or authority, is above the law. Today proved that our system of justice, while not perfect, is ultimately stronger than those who would corrupt it. What happens to all the cases that were compromised? Every case handled by this corruption network will be reviewed by federal prosecutors. Any person wrongly convicted will have their case overturned. Any criminal who escaped justice through bribery will face new charges. The reporter pressed on. Some are calling this the biggest corruption scandal in Chicago's history. Sarah's expression was steel. Then it's a good day for justice. Corruption thrives in darkness. Today we brought it into the light. As federal agents led the last of the conspirators away in handcuffs, Sarah thought about the words carved into the Supreme Court building: equal justice under law. Today, those words had meaning again. 3 weeks after the warehouse confrontation, Sarah stood in her courtroom, her real courtroom, addressing a packed gallery. Media, citizens, victims of the corruption network, and law students filled every seat. The Riverside construction case had proceeded as scheduled, with 8 defendants pleading guilty to federal fraud charges. The money laundering network connected to North Shore Casino had been completely dismantled. 17 people were facing federal charges ranging from bribery to conspiracy to commit murder. Over the past 3 weeks, Sarah began, this court has reviewed 43 cases that were compromised by the corruption network we exposed. I'm pleased to announce that justice is being restored. She looked at the families in the front row, people whose loved ones had been wrongly convicted, victims whose cases had been dismissed due to bribes, witnesses who had been intimidated into silence. Mrs. Rodriguez, your son's conviction for assault has been overturned. Evidence shows that witness testimony was coerced by corrupt officers. Mr. Thompson, the hit-and-run case that killed your daughter is being reopened. We now know the original investigation was sabotaged in exchange for casino money. Miss Williams, the domestic violence charges against your ex-husband that mysteriously disappeared. Those charges are being refiled with federal support. One by one, Sarah restored faith in a system that had failed these people. Sarah faced the cameras one final time, but her words were for every person who had ever felt powerless against corruption. What happened to me 3 weeks ago wasn't unique. It was just visible. Every day, people face systems that seem rigged against them, officials who abuse their power, justice that appears to be for sale. She paused, letting that truth settle. But here's what I learned in that warehouse, in that jail cell, in the moment when everything seemed lost. Our Constitution isn't just words on paper. It's a living promise that justice will find a way. The badges, the titles, the authority, those are temporary. What lasts is the principle that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. Sarah's voice carried absolute conviction. Justice doesn't take vacations, justice doesn't sleep, and justice will always eventually find the light. The cameras captured her final words, words that would be quoted in law schools and civic classes for years to come. We are not subjects of those in power. We are citizens of a nation built on the idea that power serves justice, not the other way around. Outside the courthouse, protesters had been replaced by families bringing their children to see where justice lived. The system was healing, trust was being rebuilt, and Sarah Douglas, federal judge, guardian of the Constitution, went back to work, because justice never sleeps.